So I'm going to try to keep it brief to touch on three important things. There's been a lot of stuff in the press, as if you paid any attention at all, about concussion. And like Sunday's paper had a big article about concussion, right? Front page, sports section. It says, concussions, no easy answers. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of stuff. Some NFL players are suing the NFL about because they didn't feel like they got treated right or something. But we're going to talk just a little bit about concussion and what you may be able to do to prevent that. But football's an inherently violent sport, so you gather out of all of you sitting here, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 this year that have a concussion per 100 players. So I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to prevent it, and also if it happens to you, what do you do? That's number one. Number two, one of the most preventable causes of death, yes, death in high school players, is hydration issues. Every single year, if you keep your eye on the newspaper, you read the sports section on the guide every day, you'll see a kid from Alabama, or a kid from Texas, or a kid from Florida drops dead and dies at football practice. And it's going to happen this year, every single year. About 5 or 6, 7 years ago, somewhere in there was a young man who played for Layton, right here, came off this field after a summer workout program. One of the top athletes in the program, deep back, running back, great shape. I think he was one of the team captains. Came off the field, collapsed, and died. That was here, right here in Utah. And it was related to hydration issues, not drinking enough water, staying hydrated, and keeping the electrolytes up. So we're going to talk about that for a minute. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is injury care, and the main thing is don't be a wimp on that. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So first of all, concussions. What a concussion is, think of it as being like a bruise to the brain. So if you get a helmet to the thigh, what does that do? It bruises the muscle in your thigh. Same thing happens in your brain when you get a blow to the head. So what do we do to prevent concussions? One of the things is use a helmet. So I brought this helmet. This is my kid's helmet. We actually played in college. This is when he was like 8 years old, okay? San Francisco. Kind of not a lot there. Plastic, little face guard, little foam inside. The striking thing, and this was pointed out in the article in the paper, is that if you compare this helmet to what we have nowadays, which is a lot of air stuff, pumped up things, and all kinds of polycarbonate materials, that you only diminish the risk of concussion by 2% by wearing all the big, high-fluting helmets we have now compared to this onesie little thing. So we might ask, why is that? We put all this stuff on our head. Why don't we keep ourselves from getting concussions? It's because your brain, I'm going to sit that right there, your brain is sitting inside this bone and floating. So it's got a little layer of fluid all the way around the brain. So it's not really touching this bone, it's floating in it. So when you have a blow to the head, you hit forward, it's not the hit on your scalp that hurts, it's the brain moving forward and hitting against the inside of the bone. And you can't stop that with the helmet. So it doesn't matter how big, you can have this big of a helmet, but if your head's moving forward this fast and all of a sudden stops, your brain's going to jerk forward and hit against either the front or the back of the inside of your skull. And that's why you get concussions without, with big, huge padding and big, huge support. So what can you do to prevent that? Not use your head, okay? The only thing that's going to keep you from getting concussed is to not hit somebody with your head. And that's really simple to say, kind of hard to do. But and I've taken care of all levels of athletes from little league to college and pro, and some guys just have a tendency to always lower their head. And so some of you, if you know who you are, or coaches, if you know who your athletes are, try to notice that in practice and say, okay, if you could just use your shoulder instead of your head, when it comes down, you got the ball, you're bearing down, the guy's right in front of you, instead of drilling with your head, do with your shoulder. Much better to get a shoulder separation than a concussion. Because shoulder separations heal. Concussions can have long-lasting consequences. Make it difficult for you to pass those tests that they're talking about and get the grades that you need to get to be in college and stay eligible. So the only way I can tell you to prevent concussions is to keep your head from being an instrument or a weapon of that mass destruction. So I brought this little ball, has a little smile on the face. It's nice and soft, okay? It fits inside here really well, but remember, it's not how the helmet fits, how tight it is, it's the brain inside there that's jerking back and forth that causes the concussions. What happens if you get one? One of the most dramatic concussions I took care of, I happened to be on the sidelines at BYU, Utah, a bunch of years ago, probably in the late 80s, I think it was. It was down at BYU, and I happened to be the team physician for Utah. So it was on our sideline, and Steve Covey was the quarterback at the time. Rolled out towards our sideline, and the linebacker did the leg blitz and came up and just hit him right under the chin with his helmet. So he just drilled him right there, and he went flying back, and so he was obviously totally down and out. And even the linebacker who hit him with his helmet was dazed. He was kind of walking around like you see some guys like that, but because Covey was on the ground and not moving at all, he was obviously the point of concern. So if somebody goes down like that, what do you do if you're a player out on the field? Most guys sit there and look at him and go, whoa, that's bad. In fact, there's a picture in the paper of this guy. He's looking at Austin Collie when he was concussed. It's really pretty scary to see somebody sitting there lifeless, not moving. What may happen is they may go into a little seizure even. So the real important takeaway message here, though, is if you are the guy out there and the trainers aren't there, coaches aren't there yet, and you see this guy totally lifeless, think of the ABCs of first aid. Anybody can do this. What's the A? Who knows what the A and ABCs are? The ABCs of first aid. Nobody knows? Yeah. Yeah, airway. A is airway, or breathing. So make sure their airway is clear. So they've got a mouth guard in their mouth, get it out of there so they can breathe. Because when they have a concussion and they're totally out, the mouth guard can get lodged back in their mouth and it'll suffocate them to death. So if you're the guy, this guy's out there, nobody else is coming around, and the mouth guard's sitting right there, get it out of their way. That was back before we used mouth guards a lot, he had a big wad of bubble gum that he was chewing on. And I remember seeing him chewing it during the game and didn't really pay much attention, but when I ran out to see him, he was starting to get blue and not breathing, and I thought, well, this is not good. I had his helmet on and everything, but I remember him chewing gum. I couldn't see it anywhere, but by kind of reaching in his mouth and that you don't care about hygiene at that moment in time, grabbed the bubble gum out that was stuck in the back of his throat, and I don't want to say saved his life, but he could have died from that gum being back there and not being able to breathe when he was knocked out. So that's the real bad kind of situation. Most often, you're going to be out there playing, and one of your guys is going to get hit, and you come back to the huddle, and you look around, and he's got this kind of dazed look on his face, like, oh, I got hit, He'll kind of just be standing there looking at the ground, not really getting what the next play is. If you notice that happen to somebody you're in the huddle with and looking across the huddle at, just ask him if he remembers what happened. Okay? The most singular, consistent symptom you'll have from a concussion is loss of memory. So you don't have to get knocked out. You don't even have to have any lightheadedness or anything, but you won't be able to remember what just happened to you. So if you have a buddy, you're playing with, you got rocked, but he got up,